Europe is known in the world for its powerful countries and its place in the world economy. However, some countries are not lucky enough to have a flourishing economy. We have ranked for you the 10 poorest countries in Europe that represent the dark side of Europe. Before we start, if you're new to the channel, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. Bulgaria is at the bottom of the ranking. It is the country that's doing the best despite the difficulties it may face. Indeed, the president is accused of embezzling European funds by the authorities in Brussels. These suspicions led to the suspension of European aid to Bulgaria, which quickly plunged the country into poverty. The country is doing well thanks to industry, which accounts for 23.8% of GDP and employs 30% of the workforce. Industry continues to rely heavily on the manufacturing subsectors like metallurgy, chemicals, machine building, which contribute to an estimated 14% of GDP, according to the World Bank. However, the most dynamic sectors are textiles, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, mobile telephony, and the software industry. Montenegro is rather well positioned in this ranking. Although its economy remains fragile, it is moving to a market system based on financial investments, especially in the energy sector and tourism. The economy also depends on agriculture thanks to its Mediterranean climate. Montenegro markets, for example, citrus fruits and olives, as well as tobacco, which is highly prized internationally. But problems persist. Poor governance, with corruption, weak independent media, organized crime, and politicization of the judiciary that hinders the enforcement of contracts and the handling of insolvency. Despite investments, poor road and electricity networks, hindering regional connectivity, high poverty, 20% of the population, against a backdrop of high unemployment, 15% in 2019, low levels of education and informality, 25% of the working population. Serbia is trying to get by as best it can. Its economy is mainly based on the service sector and agriculture, but is strongly impacted by the country's weather. The industry and mining activities suffer from a delay in development. To remedy this, Serbia is cooperating with foreign countries to obtain a massive import of know-how and modern machinery. However, the country is still plagued by corruption, a lack of government transparency, and slow judicial procedures. In addition, young graduates largely prefer to work abroad. Belarus occupies the 7th spot in this ranking. After an economic shock due to its independence, the country has still been able to rebound notably to certain assets, such as the presence on its soil of several natural resources, for example, oil and natural gas. However, the country's agricultural sector has been in freefall since 1992. Moreover, the country is supported by Russia, so the economy is very vulnerable to external shocks and suffers the consequences of the fall of the Russian currency. Macedonia is a country plagued by unemployment, which is expected to reach 25% to 40% among young people. The average salary is 400 euros. Its geographical situation does not play in its favor. Complicated relations with the Greeks because of the name of the country and borders in the north, which lead to conflicts with Bulgaria. In addition to this, there are insufficient infrastructures for transport, energy, health, and education, a polarized political landscape, tensions between the Slavic majority and the Albanian minority. However, Macedonia has many strengths: an association and stabilization agreement with the EU, candidate for membership since 2003, integration into the European manufacturing chain, and good proximity to Central European factories and crossing of 2 European corridors, wage competitiveness, support from European donors, and high remittances from expatriate workers. These strengths should help the country to achieve a better economy and a better living condition for its citizens. At the halfway point, we find Bosnia-Herzegovina, a country where the inhabitants spend 2/3 of their salary on food, so poor is the economy. This has led to an internal crisis with burned cars and buildings. Bosnia-Herzegovina does not seem to be doing anything to get out of it since it's not a candidate for integration into the European Union. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a relatively small, open, fragile, transitional economy that is dependent on the outside world, especially the European Union, where the majority of the country's investors and trading partners are located. In addition, the real unemployment rate has declined but remains high at around 20%, limiting the development of domestic consumption. Albania, on the other hand, is riddled with crime, which creates a climate of insecurity. In addition, Albania is a very mountainous country, which leaves no room for agriculture. The service sector is therefore the main activity of Albania. Moreover, a large part of the Albanians leave to live abroad, in Italy and Greece in particular, and the young people leave the country to find work and study. The country has other weaknesses: a small, open, and poorly diversified economy, unfavorable demographics, aging and immigration, a large informal economy, 1/3 that is cutting into public revenues, but is declining, and a reduced role for education and a lowly qualified workforce. Kosovo is in 3rd place. This territory has been disputed for almost 1,000 years and has suffered a long geopolitical crisis for more than 10 years. This destination does not attract tourists, as it's one of the last countries in Europe to have experienced war. In addition, public governance reforms are needed, such as securing property rights, effective implementation of contracts, strengthening the agency in charge of the land registry, reforming the judicial system, creating a commercial court of justice, digitizing and centralizing public procurement, fighting corruption and money laundering, and reforming public enterprises. The second poorest country in Europe is Ukraine. The collapse of the USSR also led to conflicts in Ukraine, notably with Crimea, a major conflict between Ukraine and Russia. These crises have led to a fall in the economy, just as in Moldova. As a result, the country faces many challenges. A business environment marked by corruption, oligarchy and monopolies, weak property rights, lack of competition and inefficient public services, weak economic diversification, sensitivity to weather conditions and commodity prices, demographic decline, regional inequalities characterized by poverty, and the informal sector. Despite some strengths as a skilled and inexpensive workforce, international financial and political support, and strategic position in Europe, the challenges faced by the country remains too great a burden. In first place, Moldova, the poorest country in Europe with a catastrophic economic situation and a political crisis that never ends. The average salary is €250 and the population emigrates massively to richer countries. This problem has persisted since the fall of the USSR, with a part of the country controlled by Moscow. Moldova's economy is therefore mainly based on market principles. The relatively high dependence on the agricultural sector and transfers from abroad continue to expose the Moldovan economy to adverse weather conditions or external shocks. Structural impediments such as labor shortages due to persistent emigration also weigh on the country's economy. Growth continues to be driven by robust private consumption supported by remittances from the diaspora, but also by increased investment. As you may have noticed, these countries are all part of Eastern Europe and have all experienced economical and political crises due to the fall of the USSR. These crises still persist and often lead to problems of international openness and geopolitical tensions. But these countries are trying to get out of it. mainly thanks to the aid provided by Russia and by the European Union. In a few years, their situations should be improved, even if they have been heavily impacted by the COVID crisis. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't hesitate to share it, and we'll see you soon.